Greetings, children of the screen, your friendly neighborhood nerd scum here once again, and I finally got a chance to check out Spiral from the Book of Saw, and I didn't really care for it, if I'm being honest, which, I always am, so, you know, it's gonna be another nitpicking, bitch fit here, but, apparently you guys really enjoy those, so this should be fun. Right on, guys. So, in all transparency, while I am a big fan of horror movies, the truth of the matter is that I am not the biggest fan of the Saw franchise. I like the first film, and then I like some of the latter films in the franchise, but I don't really care for the films directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, however the fuck you say his name, which is Saw 3, 4, or no, 2, 3, and 4. Apologies. So you might be asking yourself, well, why did you even bother watching this movie? Not only is it a movie in the Saw universe, but it's also directed by the same man. Well, it's because, this movie, number one, it looked like it had a slightly higher budget. It looked like it had a significantly different premise, or at least approach, to the material, and it has Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson in it. Or, they want you to believe that they're starring in the movie, but it's really more a matter of Chris Rock stars and is the executive producer of the movie, and Samuel L. Jackson has an extended cameo performance. But yeah, those things all made me, and the fact that the last couple of the films were significantly better, and the screenwriters of this film worked on some of those. So that made me think, okay, this actually looks pretty interesting. It's also dealing with police officers explicitly, so maybe that'll have some social relevance to things that have been happening over the last couple of years. So I thought I would give it a shot. And, it's not horrible. I can definitely say that about the film. And I also want to point out that, while I'm not a big fan of Bousman's work, I don't have any personal issues with the guy. From everything I've read, he seems like a nice guy who basically is doing the best he can with what he's given in most instances. But the truth of the matter is, when it comes to his directing, I've always felt that his directing looks more akin to kind of a music video from the late 90s, early 2000s, as opposed to a real cinematic production. But again, with this movie having a higher budget, or at least seeming to have a higher budget, based on the quality of the images in the trailer for the film, I kind of thought, okay, well, maybe this time around, because he's got a little bit more to work with, he's got bigger stars, maybe, he's going to swing for the fences and try some different stuff. That's not the case. So let's just go ahead and dive into the movie. So Chris Rock is the only good cop on a force of corrupt cops. This is not surprising to me, but already here, just based on this premise, we start getting into one of the big issues with the movie, which is that if you can think of a cliche from a cop movie, this movie has it. All the way through. He's the rogue agent of the police force who gets yelled at by his captain, and then he gets partnered with a rookie, and then, killings start happening. It very much seems as if it's trying to kind of mirror procedural kind of thrillers, such as specifically Seven is the one that it feels the most like, and it seems the most like it's trying to kind of emulate in certain ways. But even in this respect, it kind of falls short, because most of those movies, what works about them is that they're very good at building tension. So you'll have this string of scenes that slowly builds up tension, and then you get to a peak, and then it comes back down, and you get the roller coaster effect. In this movie, almost all of the scenes are up here. There's very few, if any, scenes that are down here. And when we do have those scenes, they don't really provide a lot of insight into the characters or into the world. They're just scenes that are there to establish things that you need to know, and then we're back to scenes of people yelling at each other or really intense stuff. So even in terms of the overall story, it's kind of underwhelming, to be honest. And it does have the kind of traditional Saw twist ending, but that is especially underwhelming for reasons that I will get to here shortly. The effects in the movie are really solid, and the majority of them are practical effects. They even kind of harken back more to kind of some older Saw movies, in that the traps are not like these overly complex, like Rube Goldberg-esque machines that like you would need to be a master of engineering to create. Like there's still obviously you have to be very resourceful and very intelligent to make these traps, but they're relatively simple. And the sequences that we have with them are pretty straightforward. The main issue I have with some of the traps is these seem more like traps from some of the Saw movies where the killer is no longer Jigsaw, and there's no chance that the people could actually get out of these traps. Which, because we're dealing with dirty cops and the character of Spiral is now going after police who have done horrible things, that makes sense, but because it's still presented in the traditional, you want to play a game, you have a chance to live, like Saw setup, it doesn't really work, because there's always like a timetable kind of aspect to it, and it just seems impossible that anyone could actually get out of these traps. In terms of the overall aesthetics of the movie, again, the effects look very, very good, as they usually do in the Saw movies. I will also say that the production design of this film and the general cinematography, like the cameras used, the lighting, all those things are really good, and in fact a step up from most Saw movies. The film overall looks really good, but you still have the issue of the direction of the film. The majority of the film is pretty plain. It's pretty basic in its direction, and then you have those kind of ramped up quick cuts that Boseman really loves to do, and they come at really jarring, and in this movie sometimes seemingly inappropriate moments, and they feel very out of sync with the rest of what the film seems like it's trying to do. So much of the film, while everything is very heightened and the emotions are very tense, a lot of the rest of the direction, more so than previous Saw films, seems to be like it's trying to emulate those kind of slow burn, tense building movies, and then we'll just cut into like some crazy crap, and it's just very jarring and very off-putting. And also I find that in those moments a lot of the performances tend to suffer. Specifically, there is a moment where Chris Rock, after losing another fellow officer, goes out to his car and like screams, and it's probably the worst moment in the movie in terms of his performance, which leads me nicely into the acting in the movie. The acting in the movie overall isn't bad. For the most part, Chris Rock is extremely enjoyable in this movie, and despite the fact that his character doesn't have a whole lot of different tones, he does it relatively well all throughout, and there are some moments that are a little bit weaker, but I don't feel that that is his performance to blame, but more so the direction. Like, it is part of the director's job not just to pick the shots to tell the story, but to help the actors find the right place and the right tone for all those individual moments. And it feels like in some of these scenes, such as the one I just mentioned with Chris Rock, they just never managed to get him to the right place that you would need to sell that. And when you combine that with the directing involved with the way it's shot, it just feels very forced, and I just kind of busted out laughing. Samuel L. Jackson also is very, very solid in the movie. He doesn't have a lot of scenes in the movie, but the scenes he's in, he's good despite the fact that he's Samuel L. Jackson, you know? I mean, that's what we've come to expect from him at this point in movies. You know, Samuel L. Jackson, most of the time nowadays, when you put him in a movie, he's Samuel L. Jackson, and that's why you hired him. And the rest of the supporting cast is also very good. There's a younger cop who is introduced. He's the rookie cop, and his performance all the way through is really solid. You know, I mean, a lot of these actors, I've seen them in other things, but it's people who I nor you would know their name, but they all serve their function very, very well and give admirable performances. Now, another thing that did interest me in this movie was the idea that these were dirty cops who were being targeted, and it felt like there might be an attempt to elevate the Saw franchise and give it a little bit more kind of social commentary going in. Now, in the previous films, there have been elements of social commentary at play, but they're usually just kind of part of the overall conception and setup to get to the gore. And this movie is pretty much the same. The social commentary of these being dirty cops and how that relates to our real world is almost non-existent. You know, it's like I was watching the movie, but there's never really a scene, like the whole movie is about dirty cops getting justice served to them, but like there's never really a scene in the movie where they actually like lay out parallels with our real world, or even give us cops who the cases in which they acted inappropriately are parallels to things that are contemporary kind of hot issues or, socially relevant. They're just kind of traditional dirty cops. And the traps and the way that the traps relate to the things they've done are, again, very, very basic. There's a guy who lied on the stand a bunch, so he has to, rip his own tongue out in order to not get hit by a train. There's a guy who shot someone, so he has to, do a trap that'll pull all his fingers off, or he gets electrocuted. There's the captain who's, the face of the police force, and, while she's the face of the police force and she's helped cover up a lot of stuff, so she gets hot wax poured on her face that'll suffocate her, boiling wax, while she has to try to cut her spinal cord, which is one of the iffier traps in this movie. But again, they relate, but only in a very tangential way that gets you to the desired effect of the death scene. It's not really that impactful, and the parallels are vague at best. There's just a lot of things in this movie that don't really work out, logically speaking. One of the biggest things for me is that this is a movie where cops are being killed, but there are several times where the cops who are killed haven't shown up for duty, haven't reported for duty, and no one notices. One of the early cops who's killed, his partner and him have been a key factor in this movie. And whenever it's discovered that he was the person killed, I was just wait, his partner didn't notice or report that he was not there at work whenever dirty cops are being killed? And then, as the scenes progress, you find out that, she knew that he had done some dirty stuff, but it never occurred to her. Same with Chris Rock, whenever his partner doesn't show up for work, he doesn't think anything about it. And you could say that, well, he clearly thought that he was a good cop, but he just met this guy. He doesn't know this guy. So, in a scenario where cops are being killed, and then all of a sudden you have cops who just don't show up, you'd think that'd raise a red flag, but at no point does it. At any point does that raise a red flag. Another issue that I have is, while they're trying to do, the misdirect, they kind of try to imply that maybe Samuel Jackson's character is the killer in this movie, but we have a sequence where we see him go into a building with the spirals with his gun drawn and, very clearly get taken out. So, yeah, that could be a misdirect, but that would also be, a big, big cheat and a big, big lie. So it's just that just doesn't work. It provides some decent tension between Chris Rock and some other characters who do see that as a possibility, but we as the audience never buy into the idea that Samuel L. Jackson might actually be the killer in this movie. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but another thing that doesn't seem to really work in this movie is, again, the idea that these are traps that can be escaped. Because, again, the police chief or, the captain or the head of the department, because, there's this whole thing where, the killer says, well, you're looking for the next body to drop, I will cut your head off, which, sure, why not? But then, there's a cop who's wounded out somewhere else, and then the next thing that happens is the head of the department gets killed. So, yeah, in that sequence, she's getting hot wax, boiling wax poured on her face, and she has to sever her own spine in order to survive. But, a spine, I know in movies, spines get broken. In real life, spines get broken. Spines can get severed. But, you as a person having to apply enough force on the back of your neck while you're tied down to sever your spine, that is, again, one of these things where, just the setup for the kills and the whole idea that these people might get out doesn't work, so there's no tension. In some of the previous Saw movies, when these traps are handled well, it's all about watching them try to fight to survive. And in this one, there's such a small chance of survival that there is no tension. You're just kind of waiting